Hi guys, welcome back to the channel for another video, and of course a very special welcome to my incredible patrons. We just got finished with our weekly live stream. If you haven't joined us yet, the link is in the description box below. Some of those spaces are going very quickly, so get in as soon as you can. Before we get into today's video, I was very fortunate to have been asked to be on the End Eating Disorders podcast with Millie Thomas. The episode came out on Monday. That link is in the description box below as well. Please go and subscribe to the podcast and support it. It's amazing. Today, I had the absolute privilege of reconnecting with a former client, Holly. We worked together and finished up our coaching in February before the world went bonkers. And I really wanted to have her on to talk about her experience with coaching, how it contributed to her recovery, how it didn't just contribute to her recovery, but this new lease on life and this incredible, sense of purpose and fulfillment that she started chasing after, which I think is such a great example of what recovery truly can be. It can be such a transformative experience. And I was always so inspired speaking to Holly every week and working through goals with her and just seeing how motivated she was and how much she just gave it everything. So she's a really incredible individual, and I feel very fortunate to have had her as a client and still hear from her. She still touches base. I love that. I say to clients, as you'll hear in this chat, I never want to see my clients again once we're done working together. And by that I mean, if I've done my job well enough, then they're ready for their next phase of recovery, or they're at a place where they're recovered and they want to go and spread their wings. And of course, I still want to hear from them and hear how life is going. But yeah, the aim of a good professional is to have them to the point where they're on to their next phase, or they're, doing the next thing that's going to help them, or to the point where they're recovered. So if you want to contact Holly, she does some pretty amazing work, particularly with women, and I'll put all of her stuff in the description box below. But I hope you get something out of this chat. Just for full transparency, this is not a big marketing call out asking for new clients. I have a 6 to 8 month wait list, but I'm so passionate about what coaching does and can do that if it's something you're considering pursuing for your own recovery, to work with a coach, this might give you some insight into what that dynamic could be like. And if you're wanting to become a coach, this is sort of what you can expect with working with clients. So passionate about this and what Carolyn Costin started with, this field of treatment. So just wanted to see what it was like to share the client's perspective. So hope you enjoy. Leave your comments below. I'll see you next week with another video. But yeah, talk to you soon. So Holly, thank you so much for talking to me today for this video. I've done a video previously with Carolyn Costin, who was obviously the great pioneer for coaching, to talk about sort of where coaching came from and what it is generally. And I really wanted to speak to a client because I think that that's where, we can see how much of a difference coaching is making to people, given it's such a new field of treatment. And you and I finished up working, I think we were just trying to establish, the last time we spoke was what, like January, February?
I think it was like late Feb. Yeah.
When things were still normal. Normal's not a word I like to use too much, but relative to the rest of the year, It was fairly normal back then. So obviously we worked together. I think we worked together for 6-7 months, something like that.
Yeah.
Was it about that long? I think so.
For quite a while, yeah.
Yeah, it was. And you first came to see me, obviously, so that we could work on some, skills together and to set some goals together, which we'll dive into what that was for you today and how coaching kind of contributed to your recovery. But before we get into that, what was kind of going on with you before we started working together? Where were you at as far as eating disorder stuff, recovery? What kind of space were you in before we started working together?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started working together, I was very much like in recovery, in the sense that like I had moved from many years of like being in denial about my eating disorder to I had sought help, and I had seen a therapist for a few months. That was very like short sort of few months, and then I kind of felt like I had like a bit of confidence, a bit of stamina to like try this on my own for a little while. So I was sort of just navigating it very much like through like self-learned experience, kind of like a bit of like trial and error. And I came to a point where my life just felt like it was moving so fast. And I had started this really, really big new job that I didn't love, and it didn't give me any like enthusiasm for life. And I was really struggling to keep my head above water with my eating disorder. So all these patterns really started to come back up that I feel like I had only just started to work through. And that's when I sort of realized, like, yes, a psychologist was an amazing opportunity, but I really needed someone every day in sort of like really like, let's like go through this in a fine tooth comb.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where do you need help? Like, what are you doing today? Like, what are these thoughts? What are the smaller things? So I think that's sort of where I was at. I needed some guidance. And I think the thing is, when you have an eating disorder, even though there is so much professional help, there's something about being able to relate to someone who has gone through lived experience that
Totally.
is just makes it feel like so much more real and like so much more like humanizing, I think, as opposed to like, I'm a patient and I'm struggling with like a mental illness. And like,
Mhm.
this is just such a real thing that like so many women, so many people, not even women specifically, will deal with at like some point in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Mm.
think that's probably the majority of feedback that I get is that people have hit sort of a crossroads. They're still motivated in their recovery, but what they're currently doing isn't quite filling the gap, where they have so much more knowledge, right? We're so much more aware of
Mm.
our behaviors, our patterns, maybe some of the reasons why we use our eating disorder. But in order for us to kind of get from how we're behaving to where we want to be, is a little bit more, like you say, about getting into the weeds. Like, what is actually happening on a
Mm.
day-to-day basis? What does the blueprint
Yeah,
of your day look like?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally would say like I was running, but I feel like I was like running on the spot a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I had the motivation, but like I actually don't know where I'm going right now.
Lots of energy expenditure, and then being like, oh, I'm still in the same place I was in like 4 hours ago.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
totally.
what were some of those patterns that you were dealing with at the time?
Yeah, I was very much like an emotional eater, and I was very much like self-soothing through food. I had very much had attached my worth to my body image and did a lot of body checking. It was a huge part of like every day,
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of times a day. I would always be aware that I felt like I needed to like look in the mirror and see how I was looking to determine how I was feeling and how I would react in a situation. I struggled with bulimia for years, so and I would go through different phases of necessarily like binging and purging, or just binging, or
Yeah.
even like just purging. So it was sort of like navigating all these different phases and sort of like where I needed to be and where sort of like I felt like I could be on this trajectory and like balance myself, I think.
Yeah. And what were some of the goals when we kind of work together? Because obviously, when I first speak to people in the consultation, I try to be really clear, like, this is about practical goals that we're setting, right? This is about
Mm,
momentum. It's about putting this stuff into action. It's what I call the
mm,
action stage of recovery. And you were very motivated. It was like, this has to change, right? It was definitely, this is the fork in the road and something's got to give. So what were some of those specific goals around maybe behaviors or body image more generally that you were wanting to work on when we started chatting?
yeah, I think with behaviors, I really wanted to be able to like eat freely and
Mm-hmm.
like find a bit of food freedom without having to feel like um I had to restrict or like I was doing the wrong thing. Like I just wanted to be able to like eat and live,
Mm-hmm.
and like really like integrate that into my life. That was a huge thing for me because I feel like I was missing out on a lot of life, or I was living life and feeling bad about it. So if, to find not total food freedom, but just like a bit more flexibility and a bit more like kindness with myself, I think, and also to find a healthy relationship with movement was another big thing for me. I was very confused in this area. Exercise, thought I was doing the right thing, wouldn't exercise, had a lot of guilt around it. So it was very
Mm-hmm.
much like also a huge goal was navigating that relationship and coming to like a very like balanced place with that as well, which I now feel like probably almost like a year on achieved. I really feel like that has like very much been achieved.
Yeah, because I do remember, I think diet culture was playing a big part in your
Mm,
inner monologue about what I should versus shouldn't be doing. And it felt like uh, it was, I want to do the right thing by recovery, and then trying to figure out, what did that mean? Does that mean I should engage in
mm,
movement or I shouldn't? Does that mean that
mm,
it's that duality of, while I'm succeeding at recovery, I'm failing at my eating disorder. And that feels awful. But if I'm succeeding at my eating disorder, I'm failing at recovery. So unpacking that diet
Totally.
culture stuff was really integral to a lot of
It
what we
was,
talked about.
yes, it absolutely was. And it's like you're like shifting the conversation like between like your eating disorder to now like your recovery. Like it's the same conversation, but just like a little bit, like a little bit of a healthier way. But
Yeah.
it's still, I feel like it was confusing for me being like, but I'm still having this like internal dialogue that feels like it's like this epic challenge. I think so, like working out how to like actually sit with that and move through it, because like I am choosing myself and I'm choosing my life right now. And that even though it does still feel challenging, it's moving towards something like the vision I have for my life. And like, that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I think, like it's never going to be easy. Like there's nothing, no one says recovery is easy. I actually feel like for a lot of it, like it's actually a lot harder than having an eating disorder, because you can be passive when you have an eating disorder, you know, like you're not stepping up to it. But I think whether or not like we've been passive to it or not, like every one of us has been like part of, like I would literally call it this epidemic that like I am not enough and I am not worthy. And it's kind of like I manifested this in an eating disorder. And I think like unlearning that and like shedding those masks and peeling away those layers, it's a process. It's a messy process. It's a beautiful process. And like I absolutely needed help to do it, because you just can't do it alone, you know. And I don't think it's like recovery isn't meant to be done alone. It feels like sometimes maybe it is, but like it just isn't.
Yeah. And even if that's down to, you know, for some people where treatment might not be accessible, to at least find community, to at least find other people who are going through it or have been through it, who are sharing their experiences online, where you might find them in a forum or, you know, something that's a bit more accessible for people. You're right. It's that power of being able to see that demonstration in other people of what is possible, and to kind of have walked that path for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the world we're living in as well, like connection is so valuable, and like you can feel like very disconnected when you're struggling with something like this. So I think particularly like in like your YouTube channel or forums, like women coming together to share wisdom is so empowering. And I feel like it's everything. And I feel like that's what I needed more than anything.
Yeah.
Like finding other people who had struggled with this. Like I still personally don't know anyone who has an eating disorder in my like life.
You don't know anyone.
Crazy.
You don't know anyone who discloses it.
Yeah.
Statistically, quite likely, you know, someone, they just might not talk about it. Because I did the same thing. And then as soon as I started talking about it, people were like, oh no, I've struggled with that. And these were people I've known for years. Yeah. So sometimes it's just like you're the first domino, and then you find that there's a whole lot of other people experiencing the same stuff.
Yeah. But I absolutely feel like community was like, it was just so humbling. To me, I think, and it was like very empowering.
And I think it also helps you to then establish that that split between this healthy part of yourself and the fact that the eating disorder is the external part of, you know, the process. You are not an eating disorder. An eating disorder is like a parasite. It latches onto you and uses part of your personality and your character for its own purposes, and we're reclaiming that part that it's tried to take, kind of like the healthy self-eating disorder self stuff that we used to talk about, right? So what were some of those things that, you know, were more helpful to you as far as what coaching provided that you used at the time or you're still using today? What were some of the skills that kind of resonated with you the most?
Yeah, I think probably one of the key things was like literally writing down these dialogues that I was having, and then using like evidence to be like, what's actually going on here? Because you have these, you know, you have these conversations and these dialogues consistently in your mind. And like every time you have them, even if you're a bit aware of them, if you're still having them, they're still becoming more and more ingrained until you have the evidence to be like, what do you mean? Like, where has this come from?
Where did I learn this? Nutrition advice.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. It's not until I started doing that I was like, this is, you know what, I'm not supporting myself when I'm doing this. I felt like I was, but I just wasn't. I think I literally had to write down the evidence, and I have to, when I like felt something like a heavy emotion coming up, before I could even like do that and have the dialogue, I just needed to remove myself And making that step and removing myself from an environment was pretty big for me.
Yeah.
It was
Statement.
like, that was, yeah, yeah, I think probably more than anything.
Mhm.
And that would just be like going for a walk, or
Yeah.
like just like switching things off, or like doing some deep breathing, or like moving into a bit of an embodiment practice. Like these things were so important to me to just get back to that like balancing ground, to be like, okay, now let's take positive action, you know? Because I think when you're in it and you're like feeling such like a heaviness, I think something you really taught me was that, you know, it's actually really, really hard to heal when you're on fire, literally in that moment. Like you need to like pull your head up first a bit, and you need to be able to take a breath, or like you're not going to be able to. So
Yeah.
I think um coming back to that, like evidence seeking was huge for me, and also just gaining a new awareness of like, what was I actually doing? Like I didn't know what body checking was,
Yeah.
even though I was like literally queen of it. Like
Yeah.
I actually didn't, I didn't know
You don't even
what.
realize how much you're doing it. And then someone, like, I probably got you to do a log, right? Where you're paying attention to how much
Yeah,
and it's like, I couldn't even keep the log because I would just be doing it all day, because I would just be
yeah.
writing constantly because I do it so often.
Yeah, and I think I also just like built such a toxic relationship with so many foods. Like particularly chocolate was like my huge thing. Being able to like do some exercises that made that practice really mindful, like was probably some of the most emotional work that I've ever done.
Yeah.
Like really, it's almost like when food has just been this like really heavy, painful thing in your life, and then you like literally do a practice with it that is really intimate,
Yeah.
it just breaks down so many walls. And
Yeah.
it was deeply emotional for me. And I also feel like, you know, eating has to, like you have to do it every day. You have
Yeah.
to do it many, many times a day. And the only
Yeah.
thing that, you know, we can change is our like reaction to it, and like our perception of what we're doing.
Yeah. I think, yeah, particularly that mindful eating exercise that I get people to do, which isn't just like sit and be
Mm,
in a quiet room and eat. It's really making you pay attention to the textures, the taste, how it
mm,
feels, how it kind of looks. It's different, um, forms and shapes, etc. It's like a 3 or 4 minute exercise that I get people to do.
mm,
And the purpose there is to make that healthy part of you interact with the food, so that when eating disorder self interacts with it, you can feel the difference, right? That from a
mm,
healthy self, I even have people say to me, Mia, you're making food so boring. Like my eating disorder self gets so excited about food. And I'm like, food is not meant to feel like a class A drug. It's meant to be a bit
mm.
more boring than probably how eating disorder self feels about it. So we've got to
Yeah,
force that perspective so we can see the contrast, right? It's sort of like
yeah,
with the dialoguing, you put it so beautifully that you're not even aware of how you're speaking to yourself and how negative it is, because it just becomes something you're so used to. You're the frog in hot
mm,
water. Over time, that's
mm,
become your normal. So when we introduce that healthy voice, the contrast is shocking, that you go,
mm,
I would never speak to somebody else like this, but this is what I'm listening to all day. And then you're just
mm,
less of a passenger in your own head. We want to get you into the driver's
mm,
seat. So, yeah, the thought shows
mm.
up, and now what am I going to do with it? Just let it spiral into a
Mm,
behavior, or can I choose something else?
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also so much of the work you do, it brings you to the option. Like this is all the work you can do, but then you still have the choice,
Yes.
and you have to make that choice for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the things that really stood out to me was a lot of the very compassionate exercises where you would literally do writing, like you would write down your thoughts or write a letter to your eating disorder. And I think the thing about that is like you're so in your head when you're struggling with this, and even when you're in recovery just trying to work it all out, that when
Mm-hmm.
you literally write something, it's kind of like you're manifesting it into reality, and you've removed it from your mind now, and you have a different perspective. And I think a beautiful thing for me as well, like you think, you know, and for so long you're like, I had a hatred for my eating disorder because it's this horrible thing, and it was so
Yeah.
self-sabotaging, it caused me so much pain. But to write a letter to it from a place of compassion and be like, you know what, you actually were trying to protect me, and you served me for a point in my life, and I feel like I probably really needed you. Oh my gosh, I think there was this beautiful metaphor that we worked with a lot, I think we spoke about it a lot, but it was like you're like traveling down a river and you're like holding onto a log, and like the log is like your eating disorder, and like it's keeping you alive right now. Like you would drown without it because you don't know how to swim. So it's like when you're going through recovery, like you're moving a little bit further away from the log, and like, you know, you're treading water a little bit, and then you're coming back to it because you can't quite make it to shore, and then you can swim around it a bit, and eventually you can make it to shore because you no longer need that. But it got you to here, you know. And I look back on like my whole recovery journey, and like I'm very much like still in recovery for sure. There's days and I'm like, I'm really tired of this, like I want to but you keep going, you know, because like when you look back and be like, look how far I have come, like I'm so proud of my journey, that like I would never go back there. Like it's not an option. And even like going through 2020, like the world has been chaotic, but I feel like you came to me at a time where I really needed you so that I could develop the skills I needed to move through like the most epic year ever.
Well, I think that's what, you know, I really try to impart to people. And I think that you latched onto this really early, because it's tiring, it's exhausting. And sometimes we're just like, I am over this. But when we don't just see recovery as beneficial for getting rid of our eating disorder, but developing life skills and developing coping skills, like I still dialogue. I don't dialogue with an eating disorder self. I still dialogue with a critical self, which we all have, because otherwise we'd all be serial killers. Like we'd all be psychopaths if we didn't have a bit of a balanced out voice in our head, right? So these are life skills. They're not just recovery skills. And with 2020, I don't think, you know, there's a better example of these approaches that we take: self-compassion, kindness, patience, being interactive with ourselves, being aware of ourselves, goes well beyond, well, there goes my eating disorder and I can, you know, that I guess that was worth it. It's an investment for something much bigger than just that.
Yeah, absolutely. I so agree. It's so like it's recovery, but also like these are life skills.
Yeah.
I've like learnt more in recovery than I did in like all of my schooling years.
Yeah.
Like I've used my recovery skills more than I've used my degrees.
Well, I dropped out first year of uni and I'm like, well, I'm with your recovery. So maybe that's like a version of my degree.
Yeah, like a way better version.
A life skill degree. So now that we've kind of, you know, we did our work together, and like I say to clients all the time, you know, it's really up to them when they want to go and spread their wings, and if they're still in recovery and using the skills, but they feel like they need to go and do this independently. I say to all my clients, you know, my goal is to never see you again. And I mean that in the loveliest way possible, because obviously it's so lovely to see you and we still keep in touch. And I love to get update emails from people, or, you know, they send me what they're doing on social media. It's so exciting. But the goal is for people to go and spread their wings and figure out their recovery stuff, you know, when they feel that they're equipped to do so. So what have things been like for you since, especially given we literally stopped sessions and then the world imploded?
It must have been like the week before.
I think it was.
Like I literally think it would be.
I think it was.
Yeah, my life is dramatically different. I think when COVID first hit, I was like running a wedding company in Melbourne. I like lost my job. Obviously, like events not really going to happen, are they?
Yeah.
But I had already resigned because I feel like the work we had done had really given me the motivation.
I think you had resigned in like our last couple of sessions because you were like, I am going to do this life thing. Like you
totally
in a total like, let's do this. This is, you know, life is exciting. Let's go and grab it by the balls for
totally. I was ready for life. I knew that I was like, my eating disorder had kept me small, and I didn't feel like I wasn't going to be small anymore, you know, like I was deserving of so much more. And what felt very intuitive to me was to like move into state and reach out to a business that I was really passionate about and like start to run that business. So in short, like that's what I've done. I've moved to Byron Bay. Like I left a very stable job, stable home, stable relationship to go on an intuitive feeling and back myself. Like I've never had to back myself more than I have doing this. And the thing that is like supported me to do that and kept my feet on the ground is that like I know I have my recovery with me. And like the more I learn about recovery, the closer I get to myself, like the more I become myself. And I feel like I am running a business that is all about being really compassionate for women and female connection, and really providing a space and facilitating like love and nurturance between women. And I feel like I'm so much more compassionate, and I feel like I was ready to run this business because of the work I had done. I don't think I would be able to have the life skills I had and be able to relate to women in the way I can if I hadn't lived through that. And I think the other thing is that feels really important to me is that when you hold so much because you have an eating disorder, like you are holding so much, you also need to be held.
Yes.
You know, you really need to be held because you literally have the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I think like having someone like you that you can reach out to every single day to like do like the nitty gritty, like fine tooth comb stuff, that literally saved me. Like that's what I needed in that moment.
Yeah. You need
You know?
someone to back up. There is this emerging healthy you, and you need someone to back up those instincts to say, yes, you're on the right track, or have you thought about it this way, or look at it from this perspective, or try this skill, or just to be validated and say, yeah, this is really hard. You are right to think this is hard, and you are right to be tired and need a break. So having someone be able to hold not just the space, but the hope, I think is really important to say, you just look at our weekly goals. I'll worry about the like 6 months from now, a year from now stuff, because this is how we're going to get there.
Totally, to hold the hope. I love that. I think that's beautiful. And that's just it as well. Like feeling like getting that validation is like, it honestly, a little bit is about the smallest bit of validation, like goes so far. Like it goes so far to be like, you're actually doing a really good job, babe. Like you've got this. This is really hard.
Yeah.
And like you're doing your best, and your best is good enough. Like you are worthy of this. Like just hearing those words, whether it's like from yourself or like from a friend or like from your coach, like it's the most empowering thing that you could
because
ever
it helps. I think that very often, you know, recovery is so mysterious. It's like, what is this meant to look like? Where is this going? What is at the end of this road? And I remember I would leave my psychologist, who I adored, and I would be like, okay, but now I have to go home and eat dinner and like not binge and purge. How do I do that? I understand myself more and the eating disorder more, but now what do I do? And I would have benefited from, this is the framework. This is what's coming next. This is what we can expect. Or if something pops up, to go, yep, that's totally normal. It might feel awful or strange, but yep, that's to be expected. Now this is how we manage that. So to have that guidance about not just where we are, but where we're heading, I think it's been such a missing piece, because it demystifies a really confusing process.
Oh, it is so confusing, and it's also so overwhelming before you start. And it's one of those things that seems so much harder than when you actually do it. It's like booking an international flight. You're like, oh, but what?
Yeah.
But like when you do it, like easy peasy, guys. No worries.
Yeah.
I'll have to pay that. No worries. I literally have my workbook with me, like more often than not. Like it's like very heavy, and I continue to carry it around in my bag because it's always going to be so useful. And sometimes I'll just flick through and like be on a random page and be like, oh, yes, that's what I needed to hear. When you like give advice to your old self to like your new self, you're like, thank you.
Well, that's the power of it. And I think that, you know, because obviously we work through, the initial work that we do together is always going through the 8 Keys book. So there's Carolyn Costin's 8 Keys textbook, and then there's the workbook with all the activities where you sort of talked about the letter to your eating disorder and these really practical tools that you're working on to get you from using an eating disorder to cope to using these actual useful practices to cope. And you know, a lot of people use general advice in recovery saying like, just journal. And you're like, I don't want to sit down and be like, dear diary, this is how bad my eating disorder is today. But in coaching, journaling is really, really specific and targeted, right? It's the dialoguing, it's the writing exercises. So when you go back and read it, you're like, oh yeah, that works. And this is how it works. It's kind of like you're putting together your own instruction manual for your future self who might forget how you coped with it before. It's very formulaic and repetitive, right? It worked yesterday, it'll probably work again today.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, the more journaling exercises you do and these more activities you do, you kind of like, at the beginning, you kind of, oh, my eating disorder has so many tricks. And you're like, I know this trick, you know, like this isn't actually that new. It's kind of just like the same thing in like a different format. So the more you do it, like the more clever you get around it, I think.
Because it's the same stuff like with the dialogues, and people are like, do I really have to do these dialogues all day? And I'm like, not forever, because they're the same thing over and over again. So the dialogues get shorter, and it gets to the point where your brain goes, I'm not even going to bother. We did this 2 hours ago. We know what the outcome's going to be. And your eating disorder is just less incentivized to show up and give you a hard time, because you've shown it over and over again with the dialogues and with evidence that it's not right. Its fears are not going to come true, and it doesn't have the answers.
Totally. And it's like, it might get to the point where it's like dialogues feel like a bit boring and repetitive, but like, do you want it to be boring, or like, do you want to be suffering? Because these are the options.
Yes, exactly. It's that whole idea, which you sort of touched on before, which is, yeah, it is really hard. Sometimes it's harder than having the eating disorder because it's more energy expenditure. It is more tiring, but it's temporary. Eating disorders are permanent, and they get worse as time goes on. Recovery gets easier, and it's short term. It's not going to last forever. Right?
Totally. And like, I guess the whole thing is that I would always remind myself, like, I'm here to play the long game, you know? This like instant self-soothing, where's it going to get me, you know? And even saying that, like, sometimes it's so much easier to say that than others. Just like, it also depends, like, recovery is dependent on like how you're feeling, and like, even I feel like my recovery is a bit dependent on like where I'm at in my cycle and how much like energy I have, and if I'm like more hormonal or emotional, but like, it's always there, and it's always got your best interest at heart. You know, like, this is no fair weather friend. Like, your recovery grows stronger, and I can definitely say my recovery has grown stronger and become like, it's like a dear old friend.
Yes.
You know, like, it's like gonna like cut the crap.
Yeah.
You know, it's like straight to it. Like, no, come on.
It's tough love, right?
It is so tough love. Sometimes I just feel like it's tough, but I'm like, okay, fair.
Which is why I think a coach is like the embodiment of your healthy self that you're working towards. Like, your coach will always be honest with you. Your coach will hold you accountable. They will encourage you and be compassionate and kind. But when they need to get through and they need to be straight shooting with you, they're going to do it. Just like your healthy self is going to not just going to sit there and say, that's fine. Like, do things that are going to hurt or harm you. It's going to go, no, this is hard, but it's what we've got to do. Like, come on, let's do it. Right?
Totally. That's it. And I think when you have an eating disorder, like, you're not going to prioritize your healthy self. Like, you've never done that. Why would you? Like, you know that like you find so much like more validation when you like prioritize your eating disorder self, because at some point it has given you a lot of validation, and like, obviously this like desire to like be loved, or like whatever it is, it has provided that for you. So your coach literally is backing your healthy self before you're strong enough to do it yourself. So having like the weekly, like, it being held accountable weekly is like, I've struggled with that. Like, I was like, whoa, I'm not prioritizing myself right now, and it's crazy that someone else is. And that's a totally new concept to like get into. But like, coaching is like, whoever came up with like coaching, 10 points. Like, it's literally the best thing you could ever do. And having an eating disorder coach is like, these things work together so well. Like, everyone who has an eating disorder needs to have a coach. I can put it on a banner. I'd put it on a bumper sticker or something.
I think that's what it says in your testimonial on my website, where it was like, do this, just do it. I look back and I think, you know, if it had been around when I was in recovery, it would have benefited me hugely, just to have, like you say, it just feels like a coach can't make you do anything, but they can show you from their own experience, but from their training as well, what's going to work. Like, here's all the tools. Like, I think we would have done the house metaphor, right? You're given this piece of land and all these tools and all this material, and no one shows up to help you build the house. You have to build it, but you got to show up every day and build it.
Totally. And you're probably going to have to knock down some walls that you accidentally built in the wrong way, you know? And like, that's okay. You've learned from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. Could go on with that for a long time.
No, I love a metaphor. It was a metaphor a minute in sessions, still is.
Honestly.
Oh my God, don't forget this. I'm like, they're really all the same metaphor, just with different angles. It's a highway. It's a house. It's a log in a river. It's, you know.
Honestly, that's so funny. I like wrote this article recently, like this blog post for the website, and the business partner was like, so I love it, but we need to get to down to about 2 metaphors. We've got about 20. Like,
Pick your favorite. Pick your favorite. Keep those. Save the rest for another one. So
So funny.
recovery or life in recovery looks like for you next? What do you think is sort of your next set of goals or what you're working towards?
Yeah, my next set of goals, um, I think it's really for me at the moment, like my life is really busy and there is so much groundlessness. Like I am moving house again next week. I've lived in 6 houses this year, like running a business, but also having a few little like side hustles. So like I'm really busy. And so it's like, where do I prioritize myself within that? And
Mhm.
I think it's like redeveloping those boundaries and still also like reworking. I think I still have relationship with some particular foods and it's like a bit of an ebb and a flow. Like sometimes I'm more comfortable eating that food and integrating it. And then sometimes I sort of stay away from it because I don't feel strong enough to be able to do that in a healthy way.
Yeah.
So I think it's particularly with chocolate and like heavy bread, I'm just continuing to be very aware, like navigating those relationships.
Yeah.
And also like the other thing with my recovery is I'm like have a very much tendency to like burn out, to like overdo it. And that like rest is so healing. And
Yeah.
like rest is my priority always over exercise or movement, which I feel my body feels amazing going for a walk, but also if you need to rest, like this is going to be more beneficial for me.
Mhm.
And I think another big part of my recovery moving forwards is like I'm really open about my recovery and my experiences, but like getting into a space where I'm more open and I can use my experiences
Yes.
to be able to like support other people, because that's where I feel like I'm at the moment. I think there's this whole thing almost I feel like that I felt like maybe like before you can like sort of share your wisdom or your perspective or your experience, like you need to be a bit of an expert. Like I've kind of had like almost felt that pressure, but I kind of think, you know what, in this area, you just need to be authentic. Like
Yeah,
it's not about
and
knowing.
you're an expert in your own recovery, right? And as long as
Exactly.
we're using those things, like that's something that I had to navigate as well, where, I
Mm,
really found this sense of passion and purpose in sharing my recovery. And it was obviously being mindful that I wasn't being prescriptive or I wasn't overstepping
mm,
professional bounds, etc., until I found that coaching was something I wanted to do. But it was about being a demonstration for other people, even just to share their story, that it is okay and safe to share your story. And
mm,
that can be a really, really healing thing, especially if there's been shame or secrecy, which has been a part of our eating disorder, as it was for me. My eating disorder was
mm,
very hidden for a very long time. So to be able to give it a voice and therefore give other people a voice is kind of like taking more from the eating disorder than it ever took from
mm,
us, which is
mm,
oddly satisfying. But it's all in your own time,
mm.
right? You can't push it until
Yeah.
you're comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And like you can't do it all at once. You need to like pick your battles and
Yeah.
like move through them and like pick the next battle.
Yeah.
I think still shame is like very much like a like sticky word for me. I feel like it's probably the emotion that like needs a little bit more work.
Mhm.
And I still feel like as I'm growing into more of a person who I feel like this is who I am, like I feel like I'm showing up as who I am every day. I'm becoming like more aware of practices that I can incorporate into my life that really support my eating disorder. Like I'm loving, like I often, like I live near the beach, so I've been like going out surfing and I'll just like sit out on the surfboard and like not catch any waves and just
Mhm.
like really connect with like the ocean and like myself and the environment. And that feels like so beneficial for my recovery. Like that's where I'll go if I feel like I'm feeling a bit off. Like I feel like I don't have like that much mental control,
Mhm.
and I'll just take myself there and just like calm into that space. So I think it's always a process, but like it's a beautiful process.
Mhm.
Like this is my self-development and like I've always been someone like I want to grow
Yeah.
and I'm going to grow and like this is my eating disorder has been a gift to me. I don't know how I would have come this far in my own self-development journey if I didn't have if I kind of wasn't on fire
Yeah. It's
for
a
a little bit.
reckoning.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, totally. It's
Yeah.
like a very much like kickstart.
Yeah. I'm always so excited to hear about what you're doing, because I could tell, within, a few sessions of what we were doing, there was this, incredibly passionate, strong person under there who was just being suppressed by the eating disorder self, which is what I always tell people, where they're like, when the eating disorder goes, like, I'll just be a black hole. There is a very,
Mm,
strong person who is within all of us, who is just screaming to get out, who is being suppressed. It's not like eating
mm,
disorder goes and there's nothing there to replace it. It's already in there. It just is waiting
mm,
to be able to take up that space as we incrementally take the eating disorder
mm.
sort of out of what it's
Yeah.
occupying.
And that's the thing, it does happen slowly. Like, it's not like, oh my God, I'm not, there's literally going to be nothing there. It's going to feel really scary. It's kind of one of those things you'll look back and be like, me? I did
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Like it's not that scary. It's actually super, super beautiful. And when you can look back and be like, look how far I've come, like that's literally magic. There's
Yes.
like no feeling in the world that is like that.
Yeah, it's very affirming. It helps you to realize, like, you've
Mm,
gone off and started a new business. I went through something similar. I was like, of course I can do this. Look what I did back there. Like, look at everything that I achieved in
mm,
my recovery. And so much of recovery is you've got to leap before you look, right? You've just got to
mm,
go ahead and do it. So when it comes to doing things that are risky in a good way and challenging and worth doing but are scary, you've kind of done a crash course in why it's so important to back yourself and just go with your instinct and say, yeah, this is what I've got to do. And if it's
mm,
scary, that's an even better reason to do it.
mm.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole thing about community, it's so important. And I feel like so many of us women, like, when did we learn to compare, and like so much of
And
this like
compete.
conditioning is competing and comparing, and like we're all going through this, so let's do it together, because like literally everyone who goes through this, like, we all have our own fears and we all have our own doubts, but we also like all have our own gifts and like our own beautiful brilliance that like we can share. And I feel like that is like deeply unifying. I feel like we're all the same and we're all on our own healing journey.
Yeah.
Like, we're all worthy of healing, and so being able to like reach out to other women, support them doing it as well, like it's so beautiful. And I feel like it's like really the way the world is moving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
So thank you so much for talking to me today. I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of what you are doing and all you've done with your recovery and how motivated you were at the end of our work to just go and grab life and go for it, which you did. And you are in the most difficult year on the calendar in some time. And yeah, please keep in touch and let me know what you're up to. And I will probably be up in Byron soon, and I would love to come and see what
oh
you're
my God,
doing.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. That would be so beautiful.
So thank you, Holly. You take care.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you. It was lovely to speak to you.
You too.